Welcome back to another episode of the IgniteU NY Podcast, powered by NYSTEC. I'm your host, Shay Brown, and here today I have with me Senior Executive Director Lisa Pimpinella from ESD Association. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. You want to give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, thanks for having me. So I grew up in Rome, New York, and completed my bachelor's degree locally at Empire State. I've worked for the association for over 30 years. And I started part-time and then grew, as the organization grew, into my current role as executive director.
So Lisa, what is the role or purpose of ESD Association?
So generally to control and prevent static discharge. So we're all pretty familiar with what a static shock would be. So for an example, when we were kids, you would take a balloon, rub it against your head, and then your hair sticks out. So that's an impact of static. And then you can put the balloon against the wall. And so then you could walk across the carpet, touch somebody, same static shock, same thing that you experience in laundry, so static cling. So these are all static electricity in action, and so that's part of our primary purpose. And if you think about those same things in electronic components, things inside your phone, your computer, that's all static discharge. So generally that would be what we would call kind of an ESD event. So that would damage any of those sensitive components inside those devices. And those types of failures, when static would damage those types of chips, that is what's going to cause companies failure, and that will cost time, money, yield, all types of different losses, quality, reliability issues, and those damages can be significant. So maybe for context, you would see, hear, or feel that static shock from the laundry or when you touch somebody when that's 2,000 or 3,000 volts. But on that sensitive device, a 100-volt shock will kill that part. So it's a pretty significant concern.
Yeah, and it sounds like electrostatic discharge is just something that's naturally occurring. So it's something that we have to find ways to combat when we're developing electronics.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
What separates you from other kind of electrostatic entities?
So I would say first that primarily our accreditation through the National Standards Institute. So that's a big differentiation of what we'd bring to the table versus a different organization who may write industry information or give resources. So really what that means is the documents that we produce are accredited by this United States national body, and also through the Electrical Technical Commission, which is the IEC body. They have country representatives, and so our organization holds the seat for the United States. Most of our standards are recognized as technically equivalent to those international standards. So that means they can become the norm in other countries. So I think the other primary strength that we have is programs of education and training that are coming to you from an industry body instead of a single company or a single person.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your organization, just with the things that it's involved in, having that seat on that board, is really kind of giving you a lot of information from multiple sources, so you can continue to adapt and build, your ways and processes of doing ESD work. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely brings that to the forefront and expands past the United States base and really brings us internationally for sure.
And I would say that is a huge standout thing, because you're getting information from globally, instead of just one source. That's awesome.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So there are numerous standards that are listed on your website, such as like grounding, things of that nature. Could you kind of give us a run through of what the most important ones are and, the effects?
Sure. So the primary standard that most people know is our ANSI ESD S2020 control program standard. It's really the cornerstone for developing any type of ESD control program. It's important in the manufacturing world primarily, and so it's extremely well known worldwide for that reason. Essentially, it will give guidelines for every implementation or control mechanism for an ESD control program. And so all the other standards that are listed and some that you mentioned really are mentioned in 2020 and then support 2020. So kind of going back to, what does it do? So it really is providing any administrative or technical element that would correspond with the ESD control plan elements. So anyone that's developing product, manufacturing, designing, has to protect any type of sensitive item. It would walk through each of those procedures. On the device side of the industry, really identifying ESD susceptible items, how they're used, comes into what we would call a withstand voltage. So there's documents like ANSI ESD JEDEC JS001 and JS002, and those are joint industry documents that we developed with another organization, and those get into things like human body model or charge device model testing. So what those documents do is it's the model to test that transfer from person to person, like the balloon, or person to the conductive surface, so that chip or any of those sensitive items.
With all that, that you just said, it sounds like to me, if I was to make any kind of technical product of any sort, even if it's something just like creating an automated trash can, that kind of opens on its own and closes, I would need to follow some sort of ESD standard. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it really would depend on sensitivity. So is the mechanical mechanism in your illustration, or going back to those sensitive devices, what type of voltage can it withstand before it would fail? And so it really depends on how they're designed, what that function really is, and how that discharge essentially is going to happen. And so obviously chips are developed to have some type of withstand voltage so that they can accept those types of issues. Then it's a question of how sensitive it is, where is it inside the device, and things like that.
Right. No, and that makes a lot of sense, because if it's a sensitive device and it just gets a little voltage, then it's done. And then what happens is, if you're a business and you've sent your product to be manufactured and sent out, now all of a sudden you're getting returns, people are complaining about your product, and your brand image is essentially going down from that. So it's really important to focus and make sure that you do at least follow some sort of standards when it comes to creating any kind of technical device, so that you don't enter that.
Absolutely. Yep, that would be correct.
So how does your company, ESD Association, kind of balance, accessibility and practicality of your standards?
So I think this is an area where we really excel, kind of past some other organizations in comparison. So one thing that we do is our standards meetings, so all of those individual working groups that meet, our meetings are all open with no cost. Some organizations charge a cost to participate or to attend, and so in our case, we really try and make that as simple as possible. We also write our standards through voluntary type industry collaborations. All the expert leaders in their companies, their organizations will come because they have a vested interest in those standards, because they will impact their business. So in those meetings, they can participate, contribute, influence how those documents are written, what the guidelines are, can they deploy them within their own environment. And so getting that expertise back is really important. And so we're very careful about making sure that we do have the right participants, that we encourage people to contribute. And so that's definitely where we want to make sure that we're developing things the right way and that will serve the entire industry. And then I think in terms of the public, making sure that we offer really important documents complimentary so people do have access to them. So the S2020 standard I mentioned earlier, that's a free download on the website. So it gives everybody access to that. And then other companion documents, some education modules, things like that. We're always trying to make sure that we offer either complimentary, give a discount for members, bundle products, things like that, that just kind of help the industry at least get a start in the knowledge that they need.
That's amazing, actually, especially if I'm like a startup. Sounds like you're a really wonderful resource to kind of turn to, at least to get my foothold in the idea of electrostatic discharge, especially if I am developing a product that I do want to send to a manufacturer. It'll help inform me to choose a manufacturer that is following the correct guidelines, at least that I know would work for my device.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's a great example of either a past or current standard that has really impacted the electrostatic discharge community?
So I think two things. First, kind of going backwards. So in 1995, the U.S. Department of Defense contacted the organization and made reference to a standard that they have, which is known as MIL Standard 1686. And they said, hey, we really want a commercial development of this standard. So they said, hey, get together and help us replace that. So we developed a committee, and then in 1999 launched that first version of the standard. So then it quickly became what we like to say is the gold standard for that control program mechanism. And then it did replace the MIL Standard 1686, and the military was able to officially retire that document in 2021. So it's a pretty important standard for us. It obviously set the stage for control program and that kind of use inside other industries besides just our commercial side of things. It then really spread into those other areas, so aerospace, manufacturing, and the device side, and beyond. And so at the end of the day, why did that happen? Why did they come to us? And then what was the success foundation? So it really just laid out that really practical framework for the control program, really took you through the steps that it needed. And so if you think about all the ways that static electricity can damage those components, whether it's touching the part, handling it incorrectly, that human touch that we talked about, touching a machine, manufacturing, and then getting into sort of what you alluded to in the packaging, the shipping, the transport, the processing. This document really tells you and supports all of those different facets of the control program and says this is how you approach those things. So that's to sort of set the foundation. From there, that document really started to branch out into other programs. So facility certification to that document, pretty powerful. So any company that becomes certified as a facility and it says, hey, this facility is certified to this S2020 or that IEC equivalent, so that international equivalent that is technically the same, it really says, hey, we're following these guidelines and we do have these programs and we are tested against this kind of baseline. So it would give that confidence that, hey, this company I'm doing business with or person I'm buying parts from, yeah, they follow these procedures. Then from there, you move into the education piece of that. How do I deploy it? What does it all mean? How do I do each of those testing? And so that's really the power of kind of where that document came from. So then what's happening moving forward? So as things continue to move forward in semi-fab development and all of the exciting things happening in New York State in semiconductors, now you will have a roadmap, white papers, technical reports that'll say, hey, this is what's happening in semi-fabs, here's what's coming. And things like really on the device side, the bare die testing, chip stacking, ways to make memory larger, which means you have to figure out what the advanced component concerns are, power, advanced memory, all of those types of things. So that's really sort of where the industry is going and sort of what can we expect coming forward.
That's excellent, though. I mean, that is a huge impact. And you said something that I want to backtrack just for a second, just in case anyone listening doesn't totally know. You mentioned control program. Can you elaborate what you mean by that when you say that?
Yep. So control program in this case is something that says I'm in this environment and I have certain controls I need to follow. So depending on what you're doing in that environment, you need to know how do I control all of those points where a static interference might happen. So if it is in the transport, in the packaging, in the handling, in the manufacturing space, anything that you're doing along the life of that sensitive area, that sort of encompasses your control program. So there's certain things you have to do at all those stages. So that really becomes the critical kind of baseline and foundation for anything that you're working on.
Yeah, and for anyone who might be a little like confused or like, what do you mean even in the shipping you have to control electrostatic discharge? Well, the plastic wrap, right, that you're encasing your big packages in, you get these giant pallets of product, that actually is creating electrostatic discharge, is it not, when they're shipping and moving around in whatever, the truck, the train, the plane that they're kind of going to their next destination in?
Sure. So once they're generally packaged, they should be okay from the transport point of view, but it's getting it into the packaging. So any of that surface-to-surface contact, any of that friction that's happening, there is a static impact there. So it's what are the stages and the steps, and how much can it absorb, and where are those points of issue?
So how does ESD certification help facilities or small businesses when it comes to the processes and being compliant? And what role would you say that ESD Association has in the certification process?
So I think talking specifically about, so our role would really be relative to the certifications that we deploy that are going to be in that static discharge arena. So specifically the facility certification program, that's the largest program built around this S2020 document. So really it focuses on the elements and assessment on those key control plan pieces, and it really should give competitors an edge over someone that doesn't have it, or people questioning doing business with that company in terms of purchasing a part or anything that they do. It's really saying, hey, this organization has gone through the certification, has this assessment, and the things that they go through from purchasing and documentation and training, and it's saying all these things are there. So it really gives that confidence that, hey, we're qualified and we were audited to these different components. So that's one piece of it. Then I think on the individual side, it's then making sure that the people actually working in that environment are also credentialed, that they have the information that they need in order to help their organization stay compliant and address their needs. So things like our program manager certification or program auditor certification, it really gives them the skill that they need to know how to control static, to implement, control, design, all the different facets for that ESD control program inside their organization. Essentially, those certified professionals then contribute to that compliance, enhancing that reliability, making sure that the corporate ESD sensitive programs are intact and that they can deploy them in a meaningful way.
Excellent. I think that the key part for me that stood out as somebody, if I were to be someone working in a manufacturing facility that was creating a technical component, I would want to be credentialed in ESD just for my own safety. That sounds like a really wonderful thing just for the people who are actually working in there. I know that there are a lot that they have to do and go through. Is that kind of true? Like they have to touch a blue mat and they have to wear special gear, right? And then don't they actually have to go through a discharge machine before they're able to operate? Is that true?
So it really depends on what environment they're in and what that testing requirement is. And so you might have to do a test for your shoes before you go into an area that's going to require them. So a few different things. And then obviously a more clean room environment that's going to have a lot more control around it, and they would have to pass through something that's going to remove particles, and so that really does get into it. Even a larger niche than ESD to begin with is the clean room environment. So there's definitely a big piece of the organization that would deal with that type of really sensitive, ultra sensitive organization type work.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's all very technical, and there are lots of branches into how and what you do with the different processes. And so a great way to get started would be to go to you guys and see, hey, how do I get my feet wet in this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Can you tell me what are some common mistakes that people make in the ESD compliance?
So I think there's a lot of different parts and components that as you're working and you have your program established, and then as things move forward, either personnel changes or you sort of lose the priority, you stop thinking about all the things that were super important and super rigid. And so first, really that lack of training or lack of awareness. So we have a lot of companies that say people inside that protected area, they just don't take it seriously anymore. They kind of forget about the things they're supposed to do. So without that training and that continual pressure on awareness, that seems to be a much bigger one, maybe even more so than training. We've had people come to us and say, how do I convince my people to wear their ESD shoes on the floor and not carry them in. So that becomes something that definitely happens. Sometimes it might be that consistency in using the devices or the checks that they have, so actually checking that their wrist strap is working, not consistently using processes or protocols that they have. Probably the implementation of some of those stricter policies where they'd prefer not to be tethered, if you will, to the wrist strap, to something else. However, if you're in a seated operation, you have to really be careful that, especially if you're sitting, how often do you pick your feet up off the floor? And so now are you still protected? And so all those little things, I think people generally have trouble with that, and that really comes down to an awareness issue. Then sometimes it is using non-safe ESD materials. Might be things that are brought into the environment or into the space. So bringing a water bottle into the space, into that sensitive space. Is that something that should be there? Do you need it? Has it been tested? Do you know that it's going to cause problems or not? Things like that. It's really easy to overlook things like compliance verification planning. After you're implementing your process, are you continuing to verify that you haven't changed anything and that everything new that you're doing is still meeting the conditions that you expect it to? So those become pretty common mistakes, if you will, or things that are easy to overlook.
Yeah, it sounds like the common mistakes are very much human nature in many ways, where it's like, well, I've done this, I know it, I know the process, and so you become a little bit blasé, so to speak, about some things. But it's really important to follow those things, like you said, even in a seated position. People don't understand. Obviously, people who work in there, but maybe our listeners might not know that bracelet is grounding people, so that they don't end up being the ground themselves, because that's where the danger lies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned semiconductors and chipsets and what we've been discussing here today. They're essentially becoming the standard of manufacturing in New York State. So what kind of impacts does ESD have on these industries, and what is the importance that you would say ESD plays a role in this?
So really several pieces and parts to the answer to that. It's a big question, so lots of different moving pieces there. But at the end of the day, electrostatic discharge poses that risk to manufacturing. It can damage components. That can happen during that production, the handling, the actual operation inside the manufacturing site. It can reduce yield, increase cost, compromise product reliability. So somewhere you have to go to how do I mitigate? How do I control? How do I avoid? So starting with education and training. So definitely we offer a wide range of resources, seminars, tutorials, workshops, big symposium. So all those can deepen people's understanding, give them the information they're looking for. What is this ESD phenomenon? What happens? Why does it occur? How do I prevent it? What does it do? And then control methods around that, back to that 2020 standard or any of those other education pieces. Next would be the standards development. So making sure that you have relevant standards that address the needs of the industry, that continue to look at those advanced technologies, what's happening, what is current. Is the equipment today still doing what you expected it to do in terms of protection strategy? Are the people that develop that equipment, is that equipment still available? Is it costly? How do you test for it? What's changed? From there, you're moving into certification. So how do you get that certification that says, yes, I'm following these prescriptive programs and I am certified and now have that knowledge to deploy different things like that. Other things might be, general consulting. I just need an expert to come in and help me. I don't have an ESD engineer that works for me. That's very common. So you need somebody that can just help and just give you that knowledge. So we do offer some consulting services. There's certainly other groups besides just ours that are in the industry that have the knowledge, and they will offer help as well. And so through our services branch, we do offer that one-on-one consulting, kind of share that knowledge, give you that insight without having to have somebody on staff necessarily that has all of that individualized practical knowledge. So at the end of the day, all of those things are needed to continue to empower New York's growing semiconductor and chipset manufacturing, effective management of ESD risks, making sure there's efficient operation, high quality operation, protecting product, all of those things. And as all of that continues to grow, I would hope that my organization plays a real pivotal role and that people become more aware that we're here. I think one thing that has always surprised me is we have been in Rome, New York from the beginning, and there are people today even that would be involved in new installation or new development, and I meet people all the time. Oh, I had no idea. And so I'm not even sure that even our city itself even understands that we're here.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I feel like now we're kind of in the middle of this big growing infrastructure. And so hopefully things like this bring that to the forefront. People realize there are resources and there's people that can help for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can save money on, maybe having someone full-time staff as a small business and outsource your ESD expert, I think that that's excellent. I think that's a wonderful resource, and I'm so glad that we have that in New York State and that you guys are here to provide it, especially at such a high caliber. Your standards are very high, So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Why then, with all of this, would ESD training be so important?
So I think really just going back to the basics, training helps you understand. So how do you properly implement any procedure that you need, any process? How do you do that? And so the training really is the most fundamental need. At the end of the day, anybody can have a program, but how do you know it's good? And so that deployment, that making sure that human error or lack of awareness doesn't take hold, that you do have those training options and availability to make sure that you are leading and your product quality is good. So that regular training really is what's going to enforce those current practices, not to forget to do the things that are in your program, that you are still following and monitoring and maintenance in those types of programs, and then just keeping updated on what's new and what are the current controls and procedures.
And staying updated is always the hardest part, isn't it?
For sure.
If only life were like our computers and told us to update, the software when we need it, right?
Yeah, we need an update.
How then does ESD, your association, support education in this field?
So we really prioritize education. We are an education not-for-profit, so that's our main organization structure, is that education. So we really work hard to make sure we have a wide range of programs and resources. And so whether it's complementary or things that you purchase, have to go through, making sure that we're offering things that apply to every level, so that I really don't need even entry level, but I just need to be aware. So there's an awareness training, operator training, getting into technician or comprehensive curriculum that will move people all the way through their needs. So it might start with something that just shows progression. So we developed what we call a pathway, and it really walks people through all the different courses that we have and says, here's the technical topic, or here's the level of the topic, and how you can continue to move forward in that curriculum. So you could go as far as you want with it. Go from the most entry level to the most advanced certification that we have. And in some cases, anything in between. So even if it's just a one-off course, we have at least 100 individual type courses that would walk people through all the different aspects that they might want to know. A lot of them are like 1-hour training, so trying to be very cognizant of it. Nobody wants to really sit and learn a lot of this technical information. So just ways to break that up and make it more exciting. And then in demonstration or videos, we do have a lot of industry videos on our website, which people could just focus in on one topic and just watch a video on showing the demonstration on how things work and why things are important and critical. So that's one pretty big component for sure of the education. One thing that we have done is we do have some of those entry-level technician programs that a local community college, Mohawk Valley Community College, has put students through. And so what that really gives them is a pretty big leg up on working in any of those semiconductor organizations that say, hey, here's this early practical knowledge that they have. So if they list that in their job resume and say, we've already taken this course, we passed this ESD Association operator training course. It certainly should give them a little introduction into that world, and then should say to those companies, hey, they already have a base knowledge. And so that's a really good thing. And so we hope to definitely grow that type of programming, get other people excited about something like that, make it extremely affordable and easy to implement. So that's really one of the things that we're focusing on, I think, in education today, for sure.
Absolutely. And with the developing a workforce that can work in chipset and semiconductor manufacturing, that is such an essential and valuable resource for people in New York State.
For
so
sure.
I love that. With new technology, constantly being developed and becoming smaller, more sensitive, what kind of future trends do you see for ESD standards?
So definitely one of the buzzwords would be advanced packaging, advanced materials, protective designs, things that can continue to address how small chips have become, but how many requirements those chips have. So as those component size decreases, but you have more demands on it, it's definitely a higher emphasis on things like that. So how do you address those practical challenges that the world is just giving us, those emerging technologies, and making sure that those protection measures evolve as that technological advancements happen? So that becomes really important. So our experience really says, hey, these trends are just continuing in their evolution, and those problems are coming with it, and you just have to figure those out. Certainly, from our growth point of view, when this organization was started in the 80s, we didn't think this would be something that would continue to last. And I think there was a time people thought, hey, we're going to solve this problem. And then the world continued to grow. And so for me, listen, when I grew up, I had a house phone, it was plugged into the wall, and you would beg your parents to get a really super long cord so you could go downstairs or somewhere else and take the whole phone with you so nobody would hear you talk, right? So you've gone from that type of environment. We had this house phone that had very little infrastructure. That was all coming through your electric cord, and you've moved into these phones that we have today that, well, is it a phone? It's a camera, it's a video recorder, it's a computer. It does all of these things in this small little device, and it's taken all of these larger devices that we all had when we were young, which I guess means I'm aging myself. And definitely you have to be able to design and protect all of those small devices. So if you think about even inside your phone, if you've taken it apart, you see the battery, and then inside you have these little tiny chips. Well, how much memory do you want your phone to have? And so we want the phone with the most memory, because we're going to store more video, more songs, more whatever. That memory has to be built somehow. So those things are just stacking one on one on one. So at the end of the day, how are you testing those things that are in the middle? So that's where you are with that advanced packaging in a pretty simplistic form. Those are the things that are coming, and how do you keep combating that? And how do you keep working on that testing inside that ESD robustness testing side of the business?
Wow, yeah, that's what a breakdown. And honestly, my mind was just going off in so many directions when you were talking about that, because I also was like, oh, quantum computing, how does this impact quantum computing? I'm sure that it has substantial impacts, because that's a massive computer with lots of components kind of layered on top of each other.
Absolutely, and that gets into the data center concerns and all of those different things. Now that's a little bit above my technical ability and knowledge, but I can tell you there's definitely concerns there.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've talked a lot about, all these wonderful standards and everything, but how can businesses and organizations kind of collaborate together to improve ESD control practices across different industries?
So essentially it has to happen in that collaboration. So those stakeholders have to come together, share that knowledge, decide as a group, this is what's best for the industry, or share those experiences. This is everything that I'm seeing. Here's what I do at my company, and here's how we do it at my company, and be able to share some of those best practices, and then come up with a standard that everybody can live with. So that's really one thing that we encourage in terms of that collaboration. The standards are developed with that multi-company influence and participation. That's really the engine that makes the organization run, is all of those different viewpoints and input. that cooperative effort really is what leads you to adopting and creating a standard that makes a difference, that people can live with, can follow. And at the end of the day, you start to get into some of those IP concerns. This is how we're designing things. So obviously there's a lot of IP around that. That does cause a lot of issue in our industry, and we see that more and more because companies don't want to share that. So when you stop sharing, then you stop knowing what's happening, and then you can't develop a standard around that. So those concerns will continue to come, and it's just a way of making sure that you try and collaborate to the best of your ability, that companies allow people to present papers on things that happen in the industry, and that's what will continue keeping that openness and that collaborative enforcement of stakeholders together on one front.
Yeah. You seem to have a big task on your hand of pulling people in to collaborate. Because IP is so valuable. It's so valuable, especially to a small business, and you're trying to get up and going. So it can be difficult to want to maybe communicate that stuff. And that's why associations like yours or organizations like yours are so wonderful, because you're not trying to steal IP. You're just trying to help develop all of the technologies and help the small business actually get out the door and get going, and selling their product.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of innovations are on the horizon for ESD Association?
For us, it's really listening to industry and determining what they really need. So that's going to come into some customized type of training. How do organizations differ? What are their needs? Organizations that have large support structures versus small support structures. So it really gets into that. What is everybody's unique challenge? What's common among those challenges, and what strategies and control measures can you provide that is going to keep pace with rapid technology changes? Definitely the continued reliability and safety of components, and creating those customized solutions. That is going to probably be more primary for us as we move forward. I think that's something that generally we're good at. We like to adapt, definitely like to create. I certainly, when I started, didn't think I'd be a creator of anything, because the technology side of the business is not my expertise. I'm the management side. But you do learn as you move forward. You learn to adapt and be agile, and I think that is something that me and my team specifically bring to the technical side of the business, is you have that ability to customize and take a piece of something and make something different from it. And I think that's going to become more and more important as we move forward. Identify trends, roadmaps, new technologies, that's all going to be pivotal. If you don't have the backing of a big association behind you, it becomes very difficult to do that. So I think that is something that is on the forefront. I think it's something we're ready for, that we're good at, and certainly excited for those challenges as we move forward.
Well, I am excited for you as well. I mean, especially knowing how you started part-time in this, and you have been working in this for so long, to see those innovation changes coming in the electrostatic discharge, world, has got to be really, really cool and a unique experience.
For sure.
I have absolutely loved having you here as a guest. I loved everything that you brought and talked about. It's so interesting, and I'm sure our audience loved everything too, and it was incredibly valuable. So I have to say thank you again for our community and for IgniteU and NYSTEC for being here today. Lisa, is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I think anybody that wants to learn anything more, super simple to go on our website, www.esda.org. Definitely look for those free resources, or for the info contact. Hey, I don't even know what to do, just email me. We're definitely responsive. I'm a 24-hour kind of customer service person, so definitely there are a lot of resources that people can find. I think anytime you go to a new website, it can be a little bit daunting. There's a lot there, and we do have a lot packed into it in terms of resource. So definitely people that get lost can certainly send an email. I answer a lot of the emails that come in anonymous to the info side. People don't realize it's me. But I'm pretty hands-on, and definitely want to make sure that people can find their way and get what they need, for sure.
Oh, that's amazing information to know. So if you're reaching out to ESD ESD Association, you're going to be reaching out to Lisa directly,
Absolutely.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, Lisa, thank you again so much for being here. Everyone, thank you so much for listening and or watching today. We look forward to our next episode. Feel free to leave down in the chat anyone you would like us to invite on as a guest. We're happy to hear what our audience would love to hear or learn about. So thank you again. We look forward to seeing you next time.